Hello, everybody. My name is Jason Statham, and today we'll be talking about the NFL and how they need to tackle the obstacle of the Rooney Rule. So, what happened? In 2003, Cyrus Murray included the Rooney Rule into the NFL organization to help promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so there was a major issue among the head coaching positions since there was a lack of diversity among that position and among multiple other coaching positions as well. And so during the offseason, after the conclusion of the 2020 Super Bowl, there were 7 head coaching positions open that needed somebody to fill them. In the past, offensive coordinators have been mainly the personnel that have been promoted to a head coach position. And so there were 2 offensive coordinators that should have been promoted to the position, one of them receiving 7 interviews, another one receiving 0 interviews. Again, neither of them received the head coach position. So what happened? After a long wait, it was time to either revise or replace the Rooney Rule. Our position statement is as follows. Cyrus Murray should convince the NFL to revise the Rooney Rule due to 3 reasons. The first reason being it'll allow the league to create an equitable hiring process. The second reason is that the communication throughout the National Football League will be enhanced. And lastly, it'll allow an ethical standard for them and others to follow. The first criteria within our analysis is the equitable hiring process. And the NFL did not really have an equitable hiring process within the Rooney Rule. And here's 2 reasons why. The first of which were staff issues. And so in 2003, when the Rooney Rule was first implemented, there were only 3 coaches of a minority. Fast forward to 2021, there are still only 3 coaches of a minority. And so that will also lead into the second point, which is a lack of interviews. So, because of the Rooney Rule, every team is required to interview at least one person of a minority for the head coach position. But here's the catch there were 2 offensive coordinators that were of a minority. One of them works for the Kansas City Chiefs, the other works for Tampa Bay. And one of them was offered 7 interviews. The other was offered 0 interviews, and neither of them received a head coach position. The second criteria within our analysis is effective communication. So, another reason why Cyrus Murray should revise the Rooney Rule is to reduce confusion among leaders throughout the league. There were multiple scenarios where minority coaches were either being fired or passed along within the interview process without getting a fair chance, and there was very little explanation as to why that occurred. Reducing that confusion would open the doors to providing more transparent conversations among officials throughout the NFL. To move on from that, simplifying the communication process would also benefit the NFL because it would increase project outcomes. There were multiple times when NFL league officials in the New York headquarters would pass along projects to team owners and expect them to handle it properly, although they did not get a proper explanation. So, simplifying that communication process and making it more efficient would benefit not only league officials, not only team owners, but really all the employees throughout the entirety of the league. So the third criteria within our analysis is simply ethical standards. Why is ethical standards so important to the NFL and the Rooney Rule? The reason why Cyrus Murray should revise the Rooney Rule is because of the need to evaluate ethical standards. They need to ensure the values that they have in place already and the values that they plan on creating in the future. So that way they align with the rule and it all makes sense and it flows the way it needs to. And by doing this, companies like Amazon, Facebook, and so many other big companies will continue to look at the NFL as a source of light within the diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint. And another reason as to why the ethical standards really need to be intact is to allow for proper staffing. Some coaching positions within the grand scheme of a team have a better likelihood of becoming a head coach or coordinator than other positions. Those positions within a team are also disproportionately occupied by coaches of color or white coaches. There are 4 recommendations that I would like to recommend to the NFL in order to properly revise the Rooney Rule. The first of which is a short term recommendation, which is to provide transparency. Providing transparency will be something such as recording all interviews by video or audio in order to ensure that teams are going through the proper hiring process for every head coach candidate. The second recommendation is another short term recommendation, which involves setting committee term limits. The term limits, I feel, should be set to 5 years due to the fact that committees shouldn't be working together 50 years in order to provide proper creativity and proper discussions regarding rules that are consistently changing over the course of time. So, 5 year limits would properly be able to allow innovation and creativity. The third recommendation is a long term recommendation, which involves enforcing consequences. It's pretty clear that the NFL hasn't been the best in recent years at enforcing the proper consequences at the right time. So, this would allow a structured consequence plan that teams can clearly view and see at any moment to enforce a proper DEI plan. And lastly, the last recommendation is again a long term recommendation, which focuses on the core issue. This long term recommendation will be a good reminder for the NFL and for every franchise team to be consistent of enforcing the Rooney Rule and really be reminded of what that core reason is as to why they have the rule in place to begin with. Thank you so much for watching the presentation about the NFL and the Rooney Rule, and we hope this provides more insight as to why the Rooney Rule needs to be revised.